So again, we'll just start with just a few minutes of mindful breathing. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. We can now do the loving kindness meditation. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May I be free from fear, conflict, and delusion. May my family and friends be well, happy, and peaceful. May they be free from fear, conflict, and delusion. And if you're in the working world, may my co-workers be well, happy, and peaceful. May they be free from fear, conflict, and delusion. May all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May all beings be free from fear, conflict, and delusion. We may now rub our palms together. Yesterday, I was in a mischievous mood, and I surprised the monk in London, in the UK, in the West End London, the London Buddhist Vihara, because I've been there quite often. But of course, he had no idea that I had joined the meditation session. And only at the end, he saw my name and then the picture on screen. So he was quite surprised. And after we said hello, he said, "Would you like to say something?" So luckily, I had some reading, which I did, and they found it very useful. Because of course it had to do with the dealing with the pandemic. I think I've read it to you before, and I read the one about how the world is in a very anxious, fearful, frustrated, confused state, and how the politicians and the news media people were also anxious, fearful, and confused. That one. So it was much appreciated. And the other reading you're familiar with, where I mentioned that there are some things we can't control, but what we can control regarding the pandemic is how we handle the pandemic, how we respond to it. So in a way, we're very fortunate that we have mindfulness. We have the mindfulness practice, some Dhamma teaching. Because without a mindfulness practice and some Dharma, you can imagine people can get very, very, anxious, frustrated, confused. Some people get angry. There are some people who still refuse to wear masks, believe it or not. There's some people who still refuse it. Because they claim it takes away their individual freedom. Which is a very, American attitude. And someone was asking me recently why the Asian countries have been more successful in dealing with the pandemic. And it's really because they have good leadership and the people are just more disciplined. They're not like Americans, with their big egos, wanting their freedom. The Asians are much more practical and more disciplined. Now, we mentioned last week about the body and the elements. And you can listen ever so often, the same video. It's good to go over it, ever so often, because by doing that, then the truth of the elements becomes more real, more factual. Because initially, the elements is just a concept, just an idea. But when we listen and reflect on this teaching on a regular basis, then the truth of it becomes very real. And I had thought of recording it on a CD, an audio CD, but I never got around to it in Malaysia. Because I guess if you have a CD, it's very easy to play a CD, right? Anytime you wish. But at least you have the video on Buddhist Embassy that you can listen to. But it's very profound. It's a very profound teaching, reflection. But then when you see the reality of it, then it's no longer profound. You don't see the fact of it. You just like when we practice mindfulness and we keep recognizing the truth of of rupa and nama, the body, the mind, the process, then it becomes a reality that there's only this body-mind process, this physical, mental phenomena. And that the I is just a social label. And we mentioned too that that the self, we all have a self because we're all conditioned with the self. And when you reflect on it, you begin to see how the self is created not only by language, but it is created by the thought process, the thinking process itself. Because thinking, we said, is related to memory, past experience, knowledge, information. Right? You can see that fact. And it has the tendency to project in the future. All our minds do this. So thinking is a movement in time. Thinking is a movement in time, from past to future, past to future. And of course, when you practice regularly, you can see this fact. And that is conditioning, the conditioned mind. Whereas awareness is unconditioned. We're born with awareness, which is different from the thought process. Because it's not related to past or future, to time. It is only in the present moment. Always in the present moment. And we mentioned that the awareness we had as children is the same awareness we have today. It doesn't change. The only difference is that as children, we don't understand it. But it's a perfectly natural state. But now, as adults, and we're doing Dharma practice, we have the opportunity to understand it, and of course, we appreciate the benefits of present moment awareness, mindfulness. Also, the conditioning of self, who we are or who we think we are, it's really a collection of memories because it's created by thinking. And we can see this fact clearly when we meet someone for the first time. And naturally, you talk about yourselves. And when you talk about yourselves, you see that what you talk about is just a collection of memories. All your personal history from childhood, your family background, your education history, elementary school, high school, college, maybe university. And if you're in the working world, you talk about your work history. And if you've traveled to other countries, you speak about your travel experiences, books you have read, TV programs you have read, you have watched. Now all the things you see on internet, it makes up all our personal history, right? People we have met, of course, some pleasant, some unpleasant. Sometimes people who have been very kind to us, and some people who have been very unkind. So you really begin to see that the self, who we are, the conditioning, it's really just a collection of memories. And with that comes future projections, future plans, future hopes and dreams, certain goals you'd like to achieve, and so on. And one of the reasons why the pandemic has been so challenging is that all our future plans we have to put on hold. So for most people, it's very drastic. It's such a drastic change. But with mindfulness, of course, we can deal with this uncertainty much better, because the future is uncertain. With or without a pandemic, the future is uncertain. And also, a good example of how the self is related to memories is when somebody is suffering from amnesia, temporary memory loss, say from an accident, a head injury. And when somebody is suffering from amnesia, of course, it's very confusing. It can be scary. And one word they use in English, disconcerting. It's very puzzling. Yeah. Because when we lose our memory, we don't know who we are. That's why. Because the I, the self, which is conditioning, is always based on all our memories, all the things we have done, all our personal history, including things we have done today or yesterday. And even this Zoom meeting, when this is finished, this will be a part of your personal history, part of who you are or who you think you are. So of course, when you lose your memory, you don't know who you are. It's very scary, very confusing. Now, what is interesting, if you've done Dharma practice and you're more comfortable with the present moment, even if you happen to be suffering from amnesia, it won't be so scary, so confusing, so disconcerting. Why? Because you are more comfortable in the present moment. Because the present moment is really who we are, the unconditioned state. So I might not be able to remember my name or where I live or where my family and friends are, but still it won't be as scary, as confusing. Because you're just more comfortable in the present moment. Because a very busy mind is not comfortable with the present moment. We don't see the value, the importance of the present moment when you're very busy. We don't appreciate it. Because to us, the present moment is something that you have to do something, you have to achieve something. So we're not human beings anymore. We're supposed to be human beings, but we're not human beings anymore. Not in our modern world. We're human doings. Achieving, becoming, possessing, buying, consuming, and so on. So this is why mindfulness practice helps us to come to that state of being again, to learn just how to be. And of course, this is one of the positive things about the pandemic, that we have the opportunity to really slow down and really learn just how to be. And of course, for many people, it's just so frustrating because they want to do things, they want to achieve. And of course, if you're in the business world, that is even more frustrating. So being is really a very, it's a very basic part of our nature. And of course, it's when we learn to be that we can be more peaceful. And in that state of being, we're free from time, from all the becoming related to the future. Because if you're always caught in becoming, with all this becoming, achieving, having, buying, consuming, it is also the fear of not becoming, not achieving, not having, and so on. So of course, if you have to work, you have things you have to achieve, when there's no pandemic, we have to balance that. All that becoming, achieving, doing, with just learning how to be. And we mentioned too that regretting, when we're caught in regretting and guilt and so on, that is also an aspect of becoming, but it's related to the past. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Or if I'd thought about this before, earlier, things would be much better now. I'm so stupid. Why didn't I think of it before? That's an aspect of becoming, but related to the past. So in the state of being, we're free from all this becoming, whether it's related to the future or related to the past. And so we're free of time. A state of being is a state of timelessness. And as you said, we are in touch with the timeless state of the universe, timeless dimension. And this is what eternity is. Eternity is this timeless state. And young children feel this. Young children actually experience this. And of course, most animals experience this. So to be or not to be, that is the question. That is the question. Now we mentioned about that the atoms, when we reflect on the atoms, not only are they recyclable, but they're what's known as cosmic energy. Now, you see, human language is very misleading because it creates duality, the illusion of duality. And duality starts out very innocently when we're young, by saying, I like this, I don't like that. Already that's duality. But of course, a young child doesn't understand what duality is. Well, most people don't. So you're just using language. But it is duality. Because when we say I like this or I don't like that, we're creating a subject and an object, right? I is the subject. So there's duality. And this duality becomes more deep-rooted when we identify with sense experiences. When we say, I'm seeing something, I am hearing something, I'm smelling something, I am tasting something, and of course, I'm feeling something by touch, and I'm thinking something. I'm thinking thoughts. We create duality, the duality of experience, right? Subject and object. And again, the I is always the subject. It's a center of experience. And when we reflect, when we're very mindful, we begin to see actually that the senses are actually sensing by themselves. Seeing happens automatically as long as your eyes are healthy. Seeing just happens. Likewise, hearing just happens. Tasting happens automatically. Smelling happens by itself. Touch, same thing. And for most people, thinking is so automatic. It's so compulsive. But when we say, I am seeing something, I'm hearing something, I'm smelling and I'm thinking, we believe that this I is a center of experience. There's an experiencer. But all this is created in the mind. And this was one of the insights of the Buddha. He realized that really there's no one who's actually sensing anything. That the senses are actually sensing by themselves. And of course, when you're on a retreat, you're very calm, very present, and your mind is very silent, very spacious. You can see this very clearly. And not only do we create duality of experience, but of course the discriminating mind comes in. I like it, I don't like it, it's beautiful, it's ugly, and so on. Discriminating mind. And of course, we believe that there's a thinker separate from thoughts. But this is an illusion. There's no thinker separate from thoughts. The thinker, the I, is a part of thinking. But you have to be very mindful. You have to be very aware to see this fact. But it gives you the illusion of separation, that the I is separate from objects, from smells, from tastes, from thoughts, from touch, sensations, and so on. And from that, we believe that this I is separate from the world. Where this I is separate from nature. And that's why this statement is very misleading when we say, I came into this world. Or we came into this world. Now, if you look at that statement more carefully, I came into this world, we came into this world, it gives you that impression that I came from somewhere else. I came from another solar system, and I came to this planet, in my flying saucer, my UFO, and I'm an outsider, I'm an alien to this planet. Can you see that? Can you see the illusion of duality, of separation? I came into this world, we came into this world. That's how the duality, how language, we're fooled by language and this duality. But in truth, we didn't come into the world as aliens from another solar system, but rather we came out of the world. You see the difference? We didn't come into the world as aliens. We came out of the world as leaves from trees, leaves and fruits from trees, as like waves from the surface of the ocean. We came out of the energy, the elements of the planet and the solar system. Just like all other life forms. It's the same elements, same energy. But as long as we're trapped in duality, that feeling of separation, naturally there's fear, there's worry, there's conflict. And that's why people have been asking this question for thousands and thousands of years. What happens to me when I die, and where do I go after death? That's the illusion of duality and the illusion of thinking. Because thinking is asking that question. Because thinking as the I feels separate. So it wants to know what happens to me when I die and where do I go after death? The age-old question. And I find this subject very fascinating. I think there's a video from KL, from Mahavihara. You can see it on YouTube. Go to Bhante Kovida and the age-old question, what happens to me when I die? You can see it on YouTube. But the full question is, what happens to me when I die and where do I go after death? But really, we are aspects of the planet, being aware of itself. We are aspects of the planet in this temporary physical form, being aware of itself. And on a more cosmic scale, we are the universe, being aware of itself in this temporary physical form, as Rupa Nama, body-mind phenomena. Another way of looking at it, we're apertures, openings. You know the aperture of a camera, right? You are temporary apertures, openings through which the universe becomes aware of itself. It's very profound and it's a very wonderful reflection. But of course, on the conditioned level, using social convention, we say, my name is so-and-so, and I'm, from this country, and I have all this history, these memories, and I have all these future plans, these future hopes and dreams. That is just a conditioned mind, conditioned I. But the unconditioned state is awareness, spacious awareness. And if you're on a long retreat, you can experience that state of being, which is no longer identified with this I, with all its memories and future plans, But one's being is this vast, unbounded space. And in that vast, unbounded space, the world is happening. The world is happening in that vast, unbounded space. And of course, if you can lie under the night sky, one's being is that vast, unbounded space that even the galaxy, even the Milky Way galaxy is happening in that vast, unbounded space. This is called cosmic consciousness. Cosmic consciousness. And it is something you can experience. But you have to be in a place where there's no light pollution or very little light pollution. You can lay under the stars. So then you don't have to strain your neck. When you can lay down and you expand your mind out. So whenever we have duality, whenever there's division, there is usually conflict in the mind. Just like when we have a conflict between people, when we have different beliefs, it's quite amazing how people can have conflicts, even wars over beliefs. There's also the division between the thinker and thought, the duality. You know, I'm thinking good thoughts, I'm thinking bad thoughts, and so on. And of course, if there are negative thoughts, there's more mental suffering, mental conflict. So in mindfulness, we just see thoughts as just thoughts. Only thinking. Not I am thinking, just thinking. And we can free the mind from the many stories, many dramas, worries, fears, desires, frustrations, and so on. That thoughts, images are creating. Only thoughts, us thinking. Just like when we identify with fear, you know, I'm afraid, I am scared, there is duality, division between the I and fear, between I and frustration. But with the miracle of mindfulness, we can see objectively there is fear. Right? There's a state of fear. There's frustration. There's anxiety. There's boredom. There's desire or there's craving. And of course, we bring wisdom in and remind ourselves, this too shall pass. It's just a temporary mental state, a changing condition of the mind. And we let it go. So there's no control, no conflict, no suppression. Because you see, all these mental, emotional states are a part of the process that we are, this body-mind process. It's quite amazing when you think that someone like the Buddha, he had all these insights over 2,500 years ago. The insight into non-self, emptiness, the elements, body-mind process, the five aggregates, the five factors of experience, all these things he just saw. And he saw how everything was intricately interconnected, interdependent. That nothing and no one exists as a separate entity. This is why I like to do the reflection on the leaf or a piece of paper. Because for a leaf to exist, you have the tree or the bush. And for the bush or the tree to exist, you need the soil, the earth. You need the seed also. You need seeds. Even bacteria in the soil. Even earthworms are involved. And for trees, you need birds and insects, some insects and birds. And of course, water, rain. And if you see the rain, you see the clouds. And if you see the clouds, you see the oceans, the rivers, the lakes, and the energy of the sun. And if you see the sun, you see the solar system. And if one of those items, one of those factors that I mentioned was missing, that leaf could not exist. It's a very wonderful reflection. And every time we drink something, doesn't matter what liquid it is, they are clouds. There are clouds somewhere. And of course, we mentioned on the level of atoms that because we're 70% water, many of the atoms that are in our body were once in the sky as water vapor, rain, clouds, and so on, even snow. And many of these atoms, they've been around the planet many, many times. So you can see the illusion of being trapped in thinking and the feeling of this I is separate. And we go back to that question, what happens to me when I die and where do I go after death? But when we have this understanding, the reflection that, we came out of the planet, the energies of the planet, the elements. then you realize there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. We're the planet, we're the universe experiencing itself. But of course, if you're still trapped in thinking and this I, the I wants to know where it goes. This is why the Buddha gave all these profound teachings. So we can see the illusion of a separate self, separate I. Which is just thinking, it's just thought. When you look at it, just thought. Sometimes instead of the reflection on the leaf, sometimes I use the paper. Some of you will remember I use the paper. Because the leaf and the paper are actually related. They're cousins, you can say. Because they came from the tree, right? They came from the tree. The only difference is that a leaf is organic and a paper is processed. But they both came from the tree. But again, if you reflect, go deeper, you see the same factors. You see the tree, the soil, earthworms, bacteria, birds, insects, rivers, to the ocean, the clouds. So a few minutes ago, if I had said to you, look at this piece of paper, do you see clouds here? You'd think I was crazy. Right? But when we reflect, you begin to see clouds. And you see the oceans, rivers, and lakes. And of course, we see the sun, we see the solar system, and we even see the Milky Way galaxy. So this piece of paper is the product of the Milky Way galaxy. And because this is a processed product, it didn't come directly from the tree, we also have the human factors. Because humans made the paper, processed the paper from the tree. And it gets really complex when you include human beings. Because you see the people who cut the trees down, the people who transported the logs to the factory. We call it the pulp and paper factory. You see the people who work in the factory, including all the machinery, technology, equipment. Then you see the people who transported the factory-made paper to all the, the rural, the urban areas, cities, towns. And then you see the people who are involved in making, so many different paper products from the factory-made paper. So many items. So there are many, many people involved. And then to think that each person that was involved in producing this piece of paper, they exist because of so many factors. So it shows you the web of life is very, very complex. So again, we go back to this illusion of a separate self. You can see the illusion of it. This is why the Buddha gave these profound teachings, just to show us the illusion, the ignorance of clinging to this I as something separate, something permanent, something independent from the rest of nature. Okay, at this time, are there any questions? Are there any questions?
Yes. Actually, Bhante, hello.
Yes, Uta, yes.
I wanted to make a comment because it was quite interesting to watch the paper. There was no paper, there was nothing but ocean on the paper. It totally disappeared. Because of your virtual background, it became a virtual ocean on your paper. So
Right.
if you try to see the paper, you saw the water in the paper, but it's supposed to be.
Everything is an illusion, right? Everything is an illusion.
It was a total illusion.
That's right. Even Bhante is an illusion.
So if you have to watch that video on YouTube, you will get a little chuckle about the illusion.
That's right. We're actually elements and atoms pretending to be people.
But it was perfect.
That's right.
It was perfect. It was the universe having a bit of humor and having a bit of a chuckle in the background.
That's right. That's right.
And, you know, God or the universe or whatever it is has a sense of humor.
That's right. It's called the cosmic joke. The cosmic joke.
I think that's neat.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I mean, hopefully we'll see you in the future. Or
Bhante, I have a question.
Yes, Sharon.
Is Jenny here?
It's Jenny.
Oh, Jenny. Okay, Jenny.
I'm Sharon. I gotta go.
On duality, because of the misconcept of duality, that's where we start to discriminate and judge. Am I right?
Yes. But it's a part of our conditioning, isn't it? We're educated to judge, criticize, label, of course, compare, right? We compare things, we condemn things. I like, I don't like, I want, I don't want, and so on.
So it's also because part of conditioning and also the way we see things as in duality, the I, because there's a seer. What you were explaining that there's a seer, the experiencer, and there's an object. So when we are meeting two persons, there will be two a subject and an object. So when we have that concept of duality, that's when we start to discriminate and judge. Am I right?
That's right.
I have the right understanding.
That's right. And we think this I is something permanent. It's, because the I is always there, the center of experience. Right? But of course, it's an illusion. But because we are using the I, to communicate, the I seems permanent, doesn't it? Because we're always saying I. So it gives the impression in consciousness, in the mind, that this I is rock solid, it's everlasting, it's always there. But it's because of language, And this is why, the mindfulness, and of course, if you're on a retreat, it's easier to see. Because, you're maintaining silence, you're not speaking. Of course, you're still thinking I, but the awareness is much stronger, much clearer when you're on a retreat.
All right, that means, in other words, if we should actually
Visitor, can you turn off the fan, please?
we should reflect on Rupanama, the non-self.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
That means if you want to overcome this concept of duality, we should actually reflect on Rupanama, the non-self, right?
Yes, and just practice more present moment awareness, because the awareness is what frees us from this duality. It's the awareness can see the duality and how it creates conflict, division, and you begin to trust more and more this state of non-duality, because awareness is a state of non-duality.
Okay.
That is the awakened state, because there's no I being aware, right? There's only that energy of awareness. But as you said, initially we don't see this because we're so conditioned to say, I'm seeing, I'm thinking, I'm feeling, I'm tasting, I'm going here, I like this, I don't like this. So the mind is always trapped in that duality. But of course, it does take practice, and it does take, reflection. It does take reflection. Yes, I know it takes a lot of practice, and it takes constant reflection. And of course, Rupa Nama, Nama Rupa, Rupa Nama. And you begin to see it as a reality. And yes, we still have the I, but it's only a label, only a social label. We can't get rid of it, but we can understand it, and thereby we can lessen our attachment to it. Although we still have to use it, right, in communication, but we understand it. So it's really the attachment to the I that is the source of, conflict, dukkha, and so on. So this is why it's really helpful to laugh at ourselves, learn how to laugh at ourselves, laugh at this I, laugh at it. Don't take the I so seriously, because it is there. It is part of the conditioning, but it's just a label, it's just a thought. But the most important thing is to trust, put your trust in present moment awareness and knowing. This is our Buddha nature, the wisdom mind. And it is always present. And this is the real meaning of what it is to take refuge in the Buddha. Take refuge in Buddha nature, the awakened state. That's why when I speak to traditional Buddhists, Sri Lankans, Thai, Burmese, Cambodian, and so on, because every time, you do a ceremony, you do, Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam, take refuge. But how do you say it? It's just a traditional part of the ceremony. But I would say most of them don't really understand what it really means to take refuge in the Buddha or in the Dhamma, the Sangha. But it's really about resting and trusting in this present moment awareness and knowing, the intuitive knowing. This intelligence, the natural intelligence that we have. And you know, most of our fears, anxiety is created by thinking. And you know, the power of the imagination, right? Power of the imagination. You start to, you know, think, you know, this might happen, that might happen, and so on. But the future is always uncertain, you know, with or without pandemic. Simply because our thinking is based on that which we know. Memory, past experience, knowledge, information. That's the nature of thinking. And it cannot relate to the unknown. We can only speculate, we can make plans about the future, but it's still unknown because our thinking is always based on that which we know. So in other words, it cannot relate to the unknown, right? It cannot relate to the unknown. And I mentioned this before, it's like a fish trying to relate to the experience of riding a bicycle, right? It cannot relate to that experience. Or driving a car or using internet. A fish cannot relate to those experiences. Likewise, our thinking mind cannot relate to the unknown because it's always based on that which we know, the known. You know, memory, past experience, knowledge, information. So naturally, there's fear of the unknown. There's fear of the unknown. And what thinking does to compensate for this great unknown, it projects itself beyond death. Because normally, thinking projects itself in the future, doesn't it? From the past to the future. It's always moving in time. So what thinking does, it projects itself beyond death as the I. And it says, of course, I will continue somehow after death. Very interesting. You see what thinking does? To compensate for this unknown, it's an inability to understand, to relate to the unknown. It projects itself beyond death. And this is why humans have created so many different beliefs in an afterlife. There are many, many, many. You could do a PhD thesis on all the different beliefs that human cultures for thousands and thousands of years. So many different beliefs. And reincarnation, rebirth, these are only one or two beliefs. There are many, many more. But essentially, it's the same projection that the mind is doing. Because thinking as the I is afraid to come to an end. That's it. It's afraid to come to an end. So it projects itself beyond it, which is very comforting, isn't it? It's very comforting. But I mentioned that in the silence of meditation, when we allow the mind to become quiet, still, then in that stillness, that silence of meditation, that is the unknown. In the silent stillness of meditation, that is the unknown. Meaning the absence of thought. And as you know, you cannot force the mind to stop thinking. You have to allow the thinking to become silent. And when we have this understanding, we have that experience, then there's no longer the fear of the unknown. Because we experience the unknown directly as something which is very peaceful, and it is timeless. No past, no future. And so that question, the age-old question, what happens to me when I die and where do I go after death? That question does not arise in that silence. But you can imagine many people who don't practice, they cannot understand this. They cannot relate to this type of teaching. So this is why when people want to believe in an afterlife, I said, why not? Whatever makes you feel good. Whatever gives you comfort or overcome the fear of the unknown, you can believe anything you like. And believe it or not, there are some groups in North America, they believe that this planet is not their real home. I don't know if you've heard about these types of people. Because when they see all the problems, this is even without a pandemic, overpopulation, corruption, you name it, endless wars, poverty. So how they deal with that, because they don't have, Dharma practice, is to escape into this idea that their real home is not this planet. It's another planet in another solar system where you don't have all these problems on that is on planet Earth. It's like a fantasy, an escape fantasy. And usually they meet, once a month or once every few months. And they usually meet in a very, somewhere outside of the city environment. And they're allowed, like an overnight bag. Just some basic belongings. And they usually sit in a circle and they meditate, they pray, they do chanting, and they sit and they wait. And you know what they're waiting for? For a spacecraft to come, and take them to this planet where you don't have all these problems. It's quite interesting. I don't think you have any of these groups in Malaysia. I don't think so. But there are a few groups in North America, and I think there are one or two in Europe, and they're usually affiliated with some of one or two groups. Very interesting. And of course, with the present pandemic, this planet is definitely not their real home. Very interesting.
Yeah,
so of course, yes.
I think your teaching has been very profound and very rebirth and all that. basically there are two parts. One is the training of the mind, which the Buddha focused a lot on. But the other part of the suttas that also touch on the different types of universe, different types of the world, the ghost realm, and all these different kind of realms, which I myself also find hard to comprehend.
I think that was created by the Chinese, the 31 planes of existence.
I think that is also in the Theravada belief. Even the Naga, the Devas, and all that, which I'm still struggling with that.
No need to struggle. Just read it and just go on from there. See, these things are not interesting to me. But I have met people in Malaysia.
It is not, yeah.
Yes,
And
I've met people in Malaysia who really believe in the 31 planes of existence. And I said, that's fine if it makes you happy. But fortunately, I wasn't brought up in, with all these Chinese superstitions. So fortunately, I don't have all that pollution, all that pollution in my mind. Because in the end, it's about emptying your mind. So the more we read, the more confused we become. We become more deluded. And I mentioned that one of the things I noticed.
I like the explanation on the dependent origination by using the rain and the cloud and all that, which makes it very simple to understand the concept of dependent origination. There's another way of explaining it is through Lama and Rupa, which I find to be a bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm. But of course, the recognition of Nama Rupa, Rupa Nama, is something very direct. You can see it when you're mindful. When you're mindful, you can see it. And it's very direct. It's very direct teaching. Only body mind. No permanent I. But you can see how the mind, the thinking mind, how it can become so complicated, right? We're deluded by thinking. And with wisdom, we begin to see the limitations of thinking. Limitations of thinking. So we have to end. So just continue with your practice. Read some Dhamma, reflection. There are many videos on YouTube. And if you have any questions about practice, please send me an email. You have my email address, right? Email is very easy. I find email very easy. You can ask me anything, share anything that you want.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
So
much.
take
Will you
care,
come back?
everyone.
Are we?
Be well,
I
be
know that-
happy. Be well, be happy, be peaceful.
I know that on the 22nd, there is a special day, is there not?
I don't know.
29th is the Poya day, I think, end of day. So we will inform if we can get something important, Dhamma talk.
There's only the present moment.